This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Sunday, early Monday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, tracking Hurricane Milton. Very concerned here about this storm for the state of Florida, especially and specifically the Florida Peninsula here. So, really need to take this situation seriously. I know the Tampa area seems to be where the greatest concern may end up happening here in terms of the hurricane alerts here. Really clustering and focusing on that area, maybe even eventually some extreme wind warnings and the like. But the storm surge threat here is something that's going to be potentially, and it depends on the exact track here, but potentially something that folks have not seen in their lives. So this is a very serious situation. I know more evacuations will be ordered as we're looking ahead, already hearing about some evacuation orders, but as we get into toward that Monday, things are really going to ramp up on that front, it would seem. As you can see, the organization really happening with the systems in an odd area here, really off of Mexico, but it's expected to head off toward the east here for a while and then off toward the east, northeast, and northeast here and impact the Tampa area later on Wednesday and maybe even lingering into Thursday based on some of the latest information in our area here in north central Florida and northeast Florida needs to really watch this. And there will be some pretty significant impacts, even if it follows the expected track in terms of flooding rains and even some East Coast storm surge. But if it goes a little bit further north, then we increase those threats, and then we also increase the wind threat here and the tornado threat further on up as well. So that'll be something to kind of watch here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking the situation. I know we just have to really be mindful of what could happen here. And I mean, some of the models have been just really spitting out quite a number of inches of rain, so we got to be really careful here and maybe clear those storm drains here. Clear that debris that you have left behind from Helene in anticipation of Milton because of what could happen here. It could be pretty substantial. It could be pretty significant here, folks, in terms of what Milton could bring. So again, we have to be really careful watching this on the infrared satellite. And I keep having an emotion behind me. I'll go ahead and kind of stop that and zoom on in right now so you can see it's to the north and west right now of the Yucatan. And I'm going to take off our indicators here because you can kind of see we do have an eye, it seems, trying to form. So it's trying to get us that together. It could end up, as I put the icons back on, it could end up becoming a very significant hurricane. The forecast is a category 4, and that's very significant. It could even become a category 5. That's not out of the question. Now, it is expecting to weaken a little, but it should be getting bigger here when it's doing that. So you can't lay your guard down, and sure, it'll still be very significant, even if it's a 2 or a 3 at landfall, even as a 1, quite honestly, depending on the exact track. I mean, that'll make a big difference for Tampa because if it goes as north of Tampa, then you're going to have the winds kind of coming on in there. But if it goes to the south, then you have the winds going away. So that, really reduces that. But the current track shows that, but there's a cone of concern, which shows a wide range of possibilities. So the storm, though, is we've seen storms do this before, and I hate to bring this one up in particular, but Katrina did it back in '05. It was a 5. It really took off, and the models are suggesting that's a possibility. And then it did weaken some, but it expanded, and that surge was just catastrophic toward New Orleans. Now, we don't have the same situation with levees and the like in Tampa, but if this goes right in that path there where that surge goes up Tampa Bay, it could be something that is a worst case scenario that has really been, quite honestly, an emergency management practiced for years and years because of this concern. It hadn't happened really since 1921 to an extent that it could happen. Now, we thought it might happen during Ian, but there's a track adjustment to the south. Same with Charlie back in '04. So you just never know here. As we look at this map, you see New Orleans. I just wanted to kind of, remember Katrina, how bad that was. It'll be different than that, obviously. There's not levees, like that involved there toward Tampa. But the point being is this could be very significant. It'll expand in size. That'll increase areas that are impacted by winds, causing widespread power outages across west central Florida and central Florida. Maybe even get up into North Florida, or if it nudges further south, more towards South Florida with those. But And we also think about Opal back in the 90s, Hurricane Opal. Now, it almost got to, I believe, a 5. I wasn't really, following meteorology back then. I was too young, but just a couple years old. But the point being, just reading about it, is that storm there, Opal, it was a situation where it ultimately was something that did weaken some upon landfall, but it was still very significant as we're looking around Pensacola and the like. They're back in the situation with Opal in '96, but this situation here, even if it weakens, Tampa's so vulnerable. You just have to be really, really cognizant, really, really careful here because it can get bigger. I know as it gets off the East Coast, it'll be a very deep low pressure still after it's moved across Florida. Not as low of a pressure as we had over Florida, but the point being is it may actually be extratropical later on, which is kind of interesting this time of year. But we have a cold front on the way, and in the wake of the storm system, we could actually see a scenario here where it's pretty cool out there as we're looking later in the week. So for those without power, and I think about those without power from Helene. Hopefully by then that's pretty much restored. We'll try to get into that here. Those totals that are still remaining, including some in our area, in just a moment. But for those that lose power from this one, depending on where you are, I know in North Florida, in our viewing area at least, we're going to see some 50s here for low temperatures. So it's going to be pretty cool. Maybe some light jacket weather after this passes. And it's going to play a role on how this kind of tracks, how far north it tracks and the like. And we're going to have just a pattern with a lot of rain here around. And we got to be just really careful. That may be our biggest concern in our local area, especially our inland areas and the coastal, and maybe that storm surge, even in St. John's, Flagler, Duval counties here could have, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, give or take. If it's a forecast, hadn't come out on that yet, but that's pretty significant, like what we saw in Ian and Nicole. Now, the West Coast, if it takes a track like it's expected currently to take, Cedar Key, the wind direction will be kind of pushing out here. So the concern wouldn't be as high. There's still issues, of course, with lingering debris and just the devastation from Helene, which is a very unusual complication. But if the track shifts here, we'll have the wind impact, especially pick on up around Cedar Key. So that'd be something to really be concerned about here as we look ahead. Of course, the wind direction will still be pushing away, but the wind impact would be something that would pick up significantly with a northern adjustment to the track here. So I know the official forecast has this, and we don't want to focus on the center too much. If it makes landfall where this shows, the worst surge to be closer towards Sarasota here. So that's something to kind of keep in mind because you're going to have the wind direction will be pushing out here, but then wrapping back around and pulling that surge in there. But if it makes landfall further up here, let's say it makes landfall just north of Tampa. So let's say it makes landfall kind of here. Of course, we're so concerned about Pinellas County. Had all those folks lose their life in Helene there. Now Milton could have a worse by a wide margin storm surge here. So very concerned. But that wouldn't happen if it made landfall further south. But it, very well could make landfall further north, even if it's pretty far north up here. Even if it made landfall in Homosassa Springs, it would still be a pretty significant storm surge threat here that, toward Tampa, and could even still be worse than Helene. But let's just say it makes landfall right in here. You're going to have, it's a situation here, you're going to have, now the winds here, we're going to be watching go way further to the north of that, but then they're wrapping right back up maybe Tampa Bay here, give or take, and that could be really problematic. So we really got to be careful with this here because that would be a worst case scenario. It's been prepared for years. Just one, I know the situation in Appalachia, it's something that, we saw happen in, I think, 1916, I want to say, with flooding. This was worse, it seems, but, that's something that, in the mountains, you got to watch out. It was really magnified because of the way the rain came together. But this is something here, unlike that, which, I'm not as familiar with, North Carolina mountain preparations as I am Florida preparations since we're based in North Florida. But this is something here that it's honestly, they're overdue for, sadly, around Tampa. 103 years since they've had a situation, where we have a surge threat like this one could offer here. You have that storm surge come right in and cause devastation. There's a lot of, property right along the coast here that has gotten lucky. Some of them, they didn't get as lucky in Helene the first time, really. They could say that here in a long time, but this could be much worse than Helene if it takes a track for Tampa. Now, keep in mind for Tampa, if it takes a track further up, you get that surge coming right on into Tampa there, and that's problematic. And then now, if it makes landfall further south, though, let me take the satellite off so I'm not confusing you guys too much because that's not saying too much. But let's say it goes, pretty far south here. I know Ian made adjustments. Let's just say it makes landfall around here, which will be a pretty big deviation. But let's just say that happened, then you're going to have a situation here where you're not getting the surge maybe there, but in Naples, you're really getting the surge. So the point being is wherever it makes landfall to the south of that is where you're going to have the surge in general. And to the north, you're going to have the wind going the opposite direction. So, pushing water out actually. So it's a tricky situation, but we got to be really careful here. And this storm is going to move in slower across the state than what happened in Helene. Of course, it's a different part of the state, and this is a much more, even if it's not a viewing area with the direct, core maybe as of now with the expectation. This is a much more populated area, so widespread power outages will be a big concern. We could be talking about millions of folks in the dark here. It kind of reminds you of Irma in some ways too, with the population and maybe the evacuation concern. With that, I know, state of emergency in effect for a lot of places there. So you just got to be really cognizant. As this wind field pretty big, the red circle indicates the potential for the hurricane gust. The yellow really for those tropical storm force gusts as of now. But this could be moving over a very populated area. So this could, be a big problem. And again, that speed of the storm, maybe about half, give or take, half as fast is what Helene was. Maybe, maybe just in that realm there per se. So that means more rainfall potentially for some areas, and even the way it could be structured because of the overall weather pattern could actually give that flash flooding threat more into north central and northeast Florida. It's kind of tricky here, so we got to keep that in mind. But the power outage threat, because Florida isn't that big, it's not like it's staying over land forever. Staying over land forever here with that power outage threat. So got to be really careful here. Because this could be, wide area without power. I want to see a forecast model. This was just coming on out here, and I didn't make really any adjustments in our forecast and the other graphics for this, but I know we're going to be watching out to the west for the rapid intensification, of course, watching for that rapid intensification here with Hurricane Milton. But as I go ahead and pull on our model information, we'll start on that Wednesday here. So I know Thursday is actually the anniversary of Michael in the Panhandle, and Milton replaced Michael, if you can believe that. Now we might have another M name retired, on that name list that generally reoccurs every, the names will reoccur every 6 years unless they're retired. Of course, Michael was, because it was so horrible with Cat 5 toward Panama City and that region in the Florida Panhandle. But as I go ahead and show this model here, and we got to be careful now. For one, even if it goes, a little bit further south of what this is suggesting here, and it is concerning for our area with even the wind potential, but the structure of this, whether it's, here, where this shows it, or down here, it still is going to have the heavier rain to the north here, and even a tornado threat somewhat to the north, maybe not all the way up with the heavy rain region. But the problem is this could really get North Florida and North Central Florida into a flash flooding threat. And this, this track that takes it quite a bit north here, and that storm surge threat would be really problematic right into toward Tampa. But then, this has a center making landfall north of Tampa, but then a lot of the heavy rain goes into North Florida here. This is what this model, and this is an outlier right now. The GFS American model really is an outlier, but this is also running a little behind, which that can play all the timing too into the overall weather pattern. But that's 2 a.m. on Thursday, 8 a.m. on Thursday. That's very heavy rain further to the north here, and even into southeast Georgia here. That's 8 a.m. on that Thursday, and 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And I'm just gonna say, that shows a lot of rain. That's a 6-hour rainfall, total in this run, which is not the official forecast. But in this forecast model, the American model, it says 8 inches of rain in 6 hours, at the end of this there in southeast Georgia. But before that, I'll back this up. You see here, this has a lot of rain over areas that don't need it, like in Levy and Dixie. But that's not really the forecast right now, so I don't want to see that much more for the time being. But that could happen. I mean, American model ended up being, as we got there later on in the timeline, it was a little bit more on top of things than some of the other guidance. So it's something to kind of keep in mind here as we're looking. I know it was kind of suggesting maybe some of that adjustment further east in Georgia, for instance, that ended up happening with Helene. But right now we've got to really focus on what the Hurricane Center has. And let's go ahead and kind of go over the graphics then. So this is 11 p.m. update. This is the cone of concern from 11 o'clock here, folks. And you can kind of see that while highly dependent on the exact track, Milton could bring the worst storm surge in living memory to the Tampa Bay area, and could also, though, if it takes the track, maybe more like the one that, if you put the center line with these dots, and this would actually be more about Sarasota, and those areas, Sarasota Beach, being inundated with a lot of surge because of the wind direction. Tampa wouldn't get that. They get the wind, but they wouldn't get that surge factor. But if it goes at Tampa or just north of Tampa, it could be a nightmare scenario for them. And there's going to be a lot of evacuations. I-75 already getting busy from what I've seen. I know in Irma, that road got packed, so it's going to be a mess on the road. So unless you're having to travel, I know you're going to be working a lot of you during the week here, at least some of the days, so you're going to have to travel. But if you don't have to travel, it would be, best that you're not on the road clogging up those roadways, those evacuation routes, so people can get out here and get away from that storm surge danger. As we're seeing here, 145-mile-an-hour wind expected. That's a Category 4 hurricane by 2 like at 8 a.m. Eastern time in Central. I know when it's further west, it'll do that to me. But so 8 a.m. Eastern time, north of the Yucatan Peninsula on that Tuesday, 145-mile-an-hour wind. But then you see 115 right around landfall. So it weakens some, but it's going to expand in size here. And that surge threat because of a big storm is going to be significant. I mean, it could be up there with what Ian was now, because of the wind direction and where it made landfall. Fort Myers Beach and the like got some of the worst surge. But if this goes, further north, I know Ian was supposed to go further north, and if the center goes north of Tampa, that gets surge right up into Tampa Bay in a catastrophic scenario. So it's very significant, but nonetheless, somebody along that west coast there is probably going to have, catastrophic damages. About in some ways, we look at the population density, and that worries even more because Tampa Bay hadn't seen it. But if this goes further south, it hits areas potentially that got hit 2 years ago by Ian that are, just rebuilding. I know our area, Adalia, 1 year ago, just rebuilding and something worse. At Milton, if it were to go further south in the cone, it could be a similar situation where folks are just getting back on their feet, and then it gets all wiped away again. That's not out of the question here. So we got to consider that possibility. But if this goes further north, then you're watching Tampa Bay. If it goes, really far north, like Citrus County, then you're looking at some of those counties in there like Pasco, Hernando. It's really, really terrible storm surge, but it's still bad around Tampa here. So it's a bad situation all the way around here. And I wish I had better news. It's just unbelievable. We just had Helene make landfall a little over a week ago in Florida, and now we have another nightmare type of storm headed toward the state of Florida here. So as we go ahead and say you some more information, the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale, Category 1, I know that indicates some damage, sure. But then you're expecting right now, though, a Category 4 impact here. Category 1 still means power outages, no doubt, but a Category 4 means catastrophic problems. And that's what the forecast is for, and still a Category 3 at landfall. So even the winds are expected to be devastating at landfall here, even in a weakening of the winds by just a little bit. But you got to run from the water, and that's what we're talking about with the storm surge here that we're expecting from Milton. I know Leslie and Kirk out there as well. That pattern there can already have some, surf from, the active areas in the Atlantic there. But as we're looking at Milton there, that is, the one that's going to be problematic. And then after that, Nadine and Oscar on the list. I know there's another area that the Hurricane Center hadn't pinpointed yet, but some of the models are trying to, spin up an area that we're already seeing rain from to some degree, that's out ahead of Milton. And they're trying to spin it up into maybe Nadine, but it might not develop until after it moves past Florida and toward the Bahamas. So we shall see. But again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here on what's going on. As let's look at the Tampa Bay area now. I know Wednesday and Thursday here, folks. I mean, we're very concerned about you guys around Tampa. Very concerned in that area. I know this is, it's an area that gets planned for as we're looking. We're on alert mode, obviously. I know we had the logo red still because of the recovery from Helene, but now it's all about Milton here in terms of being in alert mode. We're still, just thinking about everybody impacted by Helene. A horrible storm, one of the deadliest we've seen in the continental U.S. here, in the last 50 years. But Milton right now, we gotta take heed from this because Tampa Bay could see it so bad. I know as we get further in there, the wind threat will still be significant, and it hadn't been like that in areas like Orlando in a while, so you got to prepare there too, and I have a graphic in here about that later on. But Wednesday into Thursday here, again, very severe threat for Tampa. The wind, an extreme threat based on the latest information. Extended power outage is likely, so very serious situation for the Tampa area. Maybe something that is unprecedented here, again, in living memory. It could be something. We say 103 years. I guess there probably are some folks still around that were there for that storm 103 years ago. But it could rival the hurricane. It was in October 1921. It came in at the wrong angle and caused big problems. But there's a lot more folks there now. I know, talking about, living memory, it just makes me think. There could have been people that were a few years old, a handful of them, that are now, about 105, give or take, in an assisted living or a nursing home, and now they're having to evacuate from this because of this serious threat. But most folks haven't seen something like this. Again, an extreme threat. So for those that are staying, that are not running from the water, not in a mobile home, just prepare for the extended power outages. Could be out a week, give or take. I know Florida has been, just based on the numbers, better than some of the other states in terms of power restoration, but this is going to be a situation. We already have other areas that are still trying to get the power back on in the country, and then this is a more populated area than where, like Adalia here in Florida, obviously, even though that is our area, and we're very saddened about what happened with our coastal communities there, but this is much more populated. It's supposed to be a situation where it's going to be a worse situation here in terms of power because so many people will be out. It be worse than, again, not just Adalia, but of course Helene in Florida because of the population density. Even Michael, because Michael was terrible, but it hit a lesser populated area in comparison. This is about the most populated area of the state. I think it's the biggest TV size media market in the state, the Tampa area, and this could head right through that and knock so many folks that, in the dark there and knock their power out. I mean, it could be, something closer to the numbers we saw in Irma in terms of power outages back in 2017. So, but this storm surge threat, the way the direction of this would be, it'd be, they didn't get the surge really in Tampa then, to a significant level, but, in terms of just, being historical. But in this situation, we're talking about, something that could be, a once in a lifetime event here if the track verifies. For Tampa's sake, I hope it doesn't verify. I hope the storm weakens for everybody's sake. But of course, if this shifts around, it's going to impact somebody else in a terrible way. So you got to think about that too. But 9+ feet expected. They'll probably go higher with the official forecast, but that's about the highest the model want to go before they kind of get into the numbers. I didn't want to go higher than that yet, as they'll adjust things, based on what they're seeing. Of course, the track, if it goes south like the official track has now, they're going to keep a number in there that's very significant, even higher than this probably. But if it goes south, technically they wouldn't actually get the surge. It'd be to the south. But if it goes north or at Tampa Bay, then it's a situation where we're going to have a $1 billion disaster on our hands probably in terms of there's so much damage here. But you can't evacuate. You can evacuate. So we're warning you guys now to go ahead and get out in Pinellas County. And I'm sure there'll be more mandatory evacuations coming as we're looking ahead. Just heed those evacuation orders. As I know, rainfall 3 to 6 inches, isolated 9. And some of the models actually have more rain though toward North Florida. But between the surge and all the rain we've already seen and the like here and in urban areas, you're still gonna have problems. So still a high risk for that. But an extreme risk for Tampa for storm surge and for wind with gusts to 130 miles an hour possible. Of course, this is subject to change based on track adjustments, though, so remain alert. And even isolated tornadoes is a possibility, but widespread damage likely if the track verifies here. So keep that in mind. As we go ahead and see some things now, I know the highest Clearwater Beach water level there, based on, storms over the last decades here, storm systems. You see Helene by almost 3 feet, and that's why we had fatalities in Pinellas County. Unfortunately, just terrible. And this could be, though, I mean, we look back at that and, we wanted to say, okay, we're looking at the historical numbers, but unfortunately now we're having to use this to look at the future very quickly, because this could be something where, in the worst case, depending on the angle, this goes, pretty far north of Tampa, and it's a, very powerful storm, 2, 3, 4. With that low there, the angle of those, surge values coming on in, you can see a number not out of the question could be double this. I mean, it could be, they could forecast 10 to 15 feet, for instance. They talk about the National Hurricane Center down in Miami. So 6.67 feet was, the worst they've seen as you look here over the last several decades, Clearwater Beach and Pinellas County. But we could be talking about something that's, double of Helene, not out of the question here. So, that at least very well could be the forecast here. So I know 4.05 feet during Adalia, 4 feet during the storm of the century in 93. That was in the wintertime. A lot of snow to the north, but very big severe weather maker in Florida, a big wind event. Severe weather back in February 2020, a little less than 4 feet. And the Gulf flow we were tracking here, we had to do some cut-ins for that in December, in our area because of all the rain. We got a lot of rain that Saturday night into Sunday. They had some storm surge from that in that area there, 3.43 feet. But as we go ahead and say now Mexico Beach after Hurricane Michael, ironically, in a very sad way, Milton replaced Michael on the list here. So, maybe another name they get retired in this name list that, unless the name get retired, like Beryl will for sure and Helene will for sure. This name list generally, reoccurs every 6 years. It's reused every 6 years here. So, Milton might get retired too. And, the damage could look like what Mexico Beach looked like after Michael down toward some of that west coast of Florida. So please evacuate. We're talking about very populated areas here, my friends. So this is very serious. Some areas I haven't seen something like this in so long, so it could just wash a lot of things here. In terms of those most vulnerable structures, just into the water per se, or just wash things apart here, and then take out the first floors and other structures. So very serious situation. It's crazy. We keep having to, escalate things week after week now. This 2024 hurricane season is really starting to remind me of the '04 season now. So it's just terrible, absolutely terrible here. Terrifying any adjective you can use this season, because in '04, of course, our area, North Central Florida, remembers Charlie, Francis, and Jean. We also had Ivan. We also had Tropical Storm Bonnie that spawned a tornado locally. But Charlie, Francis, and Jean are the ones a lot of people really remember, I know, especially across Central Florida. And now this season's starting to be reminiscent of that for, the state of Florida here. Something, it's just, you never want to have to see over and over again. As you see now, Milton, threats towards St. Augustine there, Wednesday and Thursday. Now, you see the isolated tornado threat will be there too, but the gust potential 40 to 60, or I should say the sustained wind potential, the gust to 75. So something to be mindful of. Obviously, this can escalate, this can be higher, and would be, bumped up by me if we have a track shift, but still a high threat of power outages here, St. Augustine South in our area. So I'll see kind of that zone in a minute. We're talking about St. John's, Flagler, Putnam, Marion, especially where that biggest concern lies, but even in alleviate a lot to it here too, to some degree with the widespread power outage threat. But that can, get into Bradford and Clay and some of the other surrounding counties if the track shifts here, because honestly, the Hurricane Center track south of Tampa, some of the model guides that I'm looking at have a pretty good far bit north of Tampa, like the GFS model. So there's still quite a bit of uncertainty, but see that rainfall threat there. The models, depending on even where they sow things, no matter where they sow things, not really depending on that in some ways. The rainfall is just really still on a very high, level of concern in terms of that being produced towards St. Augustine, 6 to 10 inches widespread, with isolated 15-inch totals here, folks. So I already have that as a high risk. I have to go to extreme for St. Augustine here. So this is very concerning in that regard towards St. Johns County. The wind risk is high because 75 gusts will mean power outage is likely. It's not like it's going to just tear buildings apart at this level unless the track shifts to the north, but you're still going to have widespread power outages. And then storm surge, 3 to 5 feet above ground, could be something similar to Nicole and Ian. So keep that in mind. So evacuations may end up taking place there in that area and in surrounding zones, even maybe in Flagler, Duval, and the like. But here's storm surge. So you hear 3 to 5 feet, and you hear that's a lot less than other areas. In terms of the forecast, they have 9 plus. Would probably be higher for some of those areas on the west coast of Florida. Of course, we have 15 feet or so toward areas there like Dixie County and the like there in Hurricane Helene. So you're talking about getting very high up, and you see some of the images of the houses just torn apart, but it's just horrible, and that force of water they're coming on in. But then we're talking about a situation here, at least 9 feet, the expectation toward the west coast, so up to here, but then St. Augustine area, 3 to 5 feet. You're already still talking about a risk for people could be drowning. I know the emergency management director on his press conference on Sunday there with Governor DeSantis, he was talking about even about 3 feet. If that forecast is for you, 3 feet or more, you probably want to be evacuating because, storm surge, even at a pretty low and in some ways level, can be deadly. Even the 6 inches of water can knock you down. So keep that in mind here as we go ahead and look toward this dark area now. Wednesday and Thursday. So again, you want to stay tuned for more updates because if the track shifts, I'll have to increase the wind risk. Rain risk may not change a lot, tornado numbers, unless I really see, the concern, really escalate. I probably wouldn't change that there. If anything, because of the way the weather pattern is, I might be able to change that down. If we're kind of on the back side a little bit here, with some core air trying to come in, but as I see some of the SPC information just coming out now here in the overnight hour to other stores, but it's a situation here where the tornado risk, it depends about, where if you're in that more favorable quadrant, but also do need some instability and the like. But the rainfall threat's probably not going to change here too much. If anything, if it really gets south toward Fort Myers, maybe I can bump that down a little bit with especially the 9-inch estimate. But we're expecting here a situation where the ground's already saturated, so you'll probably, in those more vulnerable spots, need those sandbags. And no, they don't always help, but it's something that can be helpful for folks here. So keep that in mind. And this is, something that's similar maybe to Debbie in terms of rain. And keep in mind it's already been wet, lately. But it would be a situation here where we're talking about it being, quite a bit more rain for this dark area than what Helene provided. That was more of a wind threat. So right now, we had gusts, I know we don't have the measurements exactly for it, but, in general, maybe gust the potential was there, Roy. If you actually had sensors everywhere at a higher level, gust to 75 in that situation here, saying gust to 60. So charged devices, medium risk of power outages. But right now, and this is subject to change, especially if the American model were to verify, I'd have to bump the wind numbers up. But right now, the wind threat would be lower in Stark with Milton and Helene. The pressure numbers would probably be not quite as low as they were in Helene, 989 millibars where I'm at. But that rainfall threat would be higher. That flooding threat with, rivers, creeks, and the like could be pretty significant here. Could be similar to what we had in Debbie here, this year's Debbie. We had Debbie in 2012, which was problematic as well. But this year's Debbie, where we had, off the top of my head, I think it was about 7 inches here around Stark. We've had so many storms here. Normally I'd remember that right off the top of my head, but we've had so many. I think it's about 7 inches here. But, this could be similar, give or take. I mean, I will say, I had isolated 15 for St. Augustine because I saw some really concerning signals in the models here. We saw that right in the Carolina mountains here with Helene. In this situation, we don't have the mountains, so the flash flooding threat, isn't going to be just, absolutely catastrophic in a lot of instances. It could be in some urban areas for sure, though. We could have big river flooding depending on how this sets up. But, the pattern reminds me of that a little, how they were getting all that rain up there. We could end up getting that here in north central Florida. So that could be problematic. That's why I had 15 inches possible in St. Augustine. But quite honestly, some of the model guidance here, as I go back to that graphic real quick, some of the models were showing, pretty reliable guidance. GFSN, the Euro model, both were kind of doing this, even if they were tracking it further south because they didn't have as much rain right into the center, and especially the south, mainly talking about to the south of the center. They didn't, have as much rain total setting up, but they had it up here, and some of that guidance showed closer to 20 inches of rain toward Jacksonville and St. Augustine. So, and some of that could fall in about a 12-hour period. So that could be very, very, very significant if that were to verify here. So hopefully that didn't happen. That was something like Jacksonville, St. Augustine, maybe getting, the Euro model, the 18Z, it stopped before it could finish because it was still showing that rain around Jacksonville, but it was so in a situation where, about a 12-hour period, 9-hour period, it was about 18 inches of rain for Jacksonville. That would be very, very, very problematic based on all the rain we've had this year. And then on top of that, some storm surges coming in. So we got to be really careful in that regard. It could be a flood event for Jacksonville, and this could change. And the winds, might not be as bad as this, but it could be a flood event similar to Irma even for the Jacksonville area. So keep that in mind. Maybe not much for Stark, but it depends. We'll see. But for Jacksonville, it could very well be. As we go ahead and remind you of Helene here. It was a storm that's one of the country's most impactful ever. Now, on the heels of that, less than 2 weeks later, maybe about 13 days later, we're going to have another storm that maybe is one of the most impactful in Florida history, making landfall in Milton. This, storm here with Helene, though, 140 mile an hour winds preliminarily, with that minimum pressure 938 millibars. Going right there into Ward, Taylor County, 3 hurricanes there in 13 months in that region. As we remember, Cedar Key here, the damage we, do not want to see, adjustment too far north, because even if we don't have the surge up there because of the wind direction pushing away, you still have a lot of rain and wind, and then all that debris, it's kind of, the drains are blocked, and that's not good. It didn't really hardly ever happen. We had some of that in Francis and Jean, but this is a stronger storm than Francis was at landfall. Helene, I'm talking about, I've already had Debbie before that. So, of course, before Francis, you had Charlie, though. So, interesting to think about that as we're looking at Central Florida comparisons. There was a little more of a gap there between Charlie and Francis, though, I think. But as you look there and, see this here in Keaton Beach, Charlie and Francis, that gap, I'm comparing that, of course, to the gap there between Helene and Milton. Of course, Debbie to Helene, that gap was pretty big. But Taylor County there, Keaton Beach, you can see this devastation, this terrible damage there. Helene, we don't want you guys to forget about what happened with them. And then Deco Beach in Taylor County as well. And then I want to go to the power outage maps now. I also said to see if we have any questions from any of the viewers at home. I do see some questions, so I'll get to those here in just a moment. But let me go ahead and let's see here. Let me go ahead and kind of get to our Georgia power outage map, because I know there's not too many in Florida. I may pull it up too here in a second, but I just want to remind folks that we still have people in the dark because of Helene, which is just, terrible to think about. I know I didn't mention there was a threat of something. Didn't have any details at all, but I thought there might be something that came after Helene and Suriname. Now we have Milton here that developed very quickly. The models, with the Milton, for a while there, they weren't showing too much. We had something in the Pacific, though, that got into the Atlantic, and then it really got its act together here very rapidly, and that's terrible to see, and that rapid intensification, in progress. And it's a scenario here that the chances for a while had gone down to like about 30% or so of development. and then all of a sudden it jumped up. The model came on board, and now we have a potential $1 billion disaster on our hands here for Florida. So not good, not good at all. As we go ahead and show you now here, let's go ahead and pop up the power outage map. You can see Georgia, 78,315 customers here, still in the dark in the wake of Helene. Helene making landfall now, let's do the math, 10 days ago. There, a little over 10 days ago. I mean, about this time 10 days ago, it's going right across South Georgia. Let's see, you can see the power outage numbers in our area. Lowndes County, it's over 8,000 folks in the dark. Eccles County, not too many, but there's not a lot of folks there that are tracked. But PowerOutage.us here, telling the stories. We get to Ware County, I know, where Waycross is. They're out of school for a good bit longer still, over 2,000 customers in the dark. But then you look at Atkinson County, a little over 2,000. That's almost half the county. That's why it's, redder there. And then Coffee County, where Douglas is, they're about the worst one in our area. Almost 10,000 folks in Coffee County, still in the dark, still without electricity. That is very significant to be happening 10 days after the fact here. Very significant. So, I mean, that's just, you're not enjoying that one bit. I mean, I can't imagine being out of power for 10 days here. Why a lot of your neighboring counties have already had most folks get it restored, even in Florida where the storm hit. So as we go ahead and look there, Davis County was 4,000 just outside of our area. Appleton County a little over 5,000, a little over 5,500. Wayne County over 2,000. Pierce County back in our area a little over 2,000. And then some of these areas that could get a little bit worse there, maybe from Milton, Brantley, nobody out, one customer out in Glenn County, and none in Camden, and none in Charlton. So that's good at least. And you also see a cluster in Augusta where they had a lot of folks lose their life up there in that media market, which I'm going to break down here in a few minutes. But Burke County there over 3,000 in the dark, Richmond County over 12,000, Columbia County 11,000 plus in the dark there. McDuffie County, a lot. Warren County. You see the storyline here. I know some of these I might be repeating a little, but you kind of get the idea there. That track east, we had a lot of trees fall and, knockout power caused big, big problems and even fatalities here in the Peach State. As I go ahead and let me just say here, the region's view of this, you can see Florida doing better. North Carolina not doing so good. All those homes just wiped away. In some instances, some of those power outages are not from that. But as we go ahead and say here, you can see Taylor County where the storm made landfall. Granted, some folks can't receive power because their homes are tragically gone. But 72 customers in the dark there. So a lot better in terms of the numbers where this actually hit. And in Florida in general, 3 customers died in Dixie County, 3 out in Lafayette County, 166 out in Suwannee County, 86 out in Hamilton County, none in Madison, none in Jefferson, none in Leon. I do see a few out downstate, but that's not because of, Helene. I have to remind myself of the names because, we've had so many here lately, but in terms of the hurricane names, there's Henry County, a little over 1,000 out down there. I think Duval might have a few out right now. Yeah, 2,726. I know it's just rainy pattern, a little bit of wind, knocking a few things down here and there. Had some fatalities even. We learned recently from the Weather Service in Jacksonville, 3 of them in Duval County from Helene. So as we go ahead and look now at award areas there in South Carolina, you see about 56,000 customers in the dark. They're still in the wake of Helene. You see Aiken County there, a little over 9,000 customers in the dark. Edgefield County over 4,000. McCormick, Greenwood, Abbeville, Lawrence, Spartanburg, Greenville, Pickens counties. You get the idea. I mean, we're getting up to where Clemson, that school is. Still some folks in the dark up there in the wake of Helene. And the state that took it the hardest in terms of deaths there and in terms of just so many homes just washed away and wiped out because of the floodwaters there in the mountainous area. We're talking about North Carolina, of course, western North Carolina. And you see here, Transylvania County, about 4,500 customers in the dark. We're talking about Henderson County, over 19,000 customers, and a lot of these customers, their homes are gone, so they're not going to be able to receive electricity, obviously, and in some cases, sadly, it's terrible to even have to say it like this as I look at some of the counties, but sadly, as you see, Polk County, there are a little over 1,000 customers in the dark. Rutherford County, over 5,000 in the dark. Sadly, some of the families that were living in these homes have lost their lives. I mean, it's terrible to have to say that, but they were just, washed away. A horrible, horrible catastrophe. As we go ahead and look toward McDowell County, 4,900 customers in the dark. Burke County, over 2,000. Of course, Buncombe County there, where Asheville is, over 67,000. We have a lot of fatalities that have been reported there. And on this reason, there's still a lot of folks that are missing. The situation in terms of the mainland fatalities is the worst we've seen since Katrina. Not to that level or close to that yet, but there's still a lot of folks missing. And then, of course, Maria, though, that wasn't a mainland storm, but there were a lot of folks, hundreds and hundreds that lost their lives in Puerto Rico and Maria going back a while. And then as you look here toward Madison County, over 1,000 customers in the dark. And I said, we just got the advisory out on Milton, the 2 a.m. update a little early. So I'll go over that in a moment. And I'm also reminded of current threats around here, out ahead of the storm, even not great beach weather, obviously, with the clouds and the like, toward like northeast Florida, southeast Florida, but also that rip current threat's an issue, and also something to watch for if you're leaving, evacuating, if you're out in the Gulf, you still gotta watch those, water conditions there too. But as we go ahead and look, Yancey County, they're over 6,500 in the dark. Mitchell County, over 7,000 in the dark. Avery County here, about 716 customers without electricity. Watauga County there, I believe is how you pronounce that, over 5,000 without electricity. And Ask County, over 3,000 in the dark. So just telling that weather story here for sure as we're looking at power.us information. So let me go ahead and jump back on over to our other source right now. I'm going to jump away from our power.us information right now. As again, we still look at the local damage here from our storm system. So let's see what I want to do here. Let me go ahead. We got to get that new update to you guys since we're on here live. So I need to go ahead. I'll just put the satellite on real quick. Let me go ahead and give that view to you guys right now. You see that eye trying to form. Looks like it could be a pinhole type of eye, maybe trying to form there. So I bet the wind number may even be higher than 90. It could even be, I don't know for sure. I know recon is out there, but it could even be a category 2. I'm not sure. That would be 100. Okay, do we have the NHC information? Let me pull that on. I know they've been out here. I don't know if this is going to suit exactly, but I don't think that's anything new on some of that. But you can see there's our storm. There it is in relation to areas. And now I'm going to get the latest. So out kind of early on Milton. That 2 a.m. updates. That's the information coming in here during the middle of the night. Let me go ahead and look at that. Bear with me. Advisory 7 a.m. from the Hurricane Center. Okay, they're staying with 90-mile-an-hour winds now. They're saying Milton is moving erratically eastward to the southern Gulf of Mexico, likely to become a major hurricane later today. I know there's some hurricane watches that are looking toward Cancun, in that vicinity, but tropical storm warning with Cancun mentioned precisely as the Hurricane Center is mentioning that storm surge and hurricane watches. They were saying this earlier, but it's in this as well, and I wanted to emphasize this here. I want to make sure I get this out. Probably the 5 a.m. update even, that storm surge and hurricane watches will likely be issued for portions of Florida later today. So after the 1 a.m. Central, 2 a.m. Eastern advisory, the center of Hurricane Milton, it was located at latitude 22.2 north, longitude 93.0 west. Milton moving toward the east near 6 miles an hour, and eastward to east-northeastward motion is forecast through the night, followed by a faster northeastward motion on Tuesday and Wednesday. On the forecast track, Milton is forecast to move just north of the Yucatan Peninsula and across the southern Gulf of Mexico today and Tuesday, and approach the west coast of Florida and that Florida Peninsula by Wednesday. And again, I'll kind of add lib on top of that. This is a very unusual track here, so could have an unusual situation. We don't normally get storms that move like this, more east like this across the Gulf. But maximum sustained winds are near 90 miles an hour with higher gusts, and Milton is forecast to intensify rapidly and become a major hurricane later today. Hurricane winds extend outward up to 25 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 80 miles. And the minimum central pressure estimated from Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft observation is 975 millibars. So, it's going to grow bigger here as it moves. So 25 miles out now, the hurricane winds, but, later on, it's going to be a lot bigger storm. Right now, it's pretty small. It kind of, in some ways, the size of it, right now anyway, a little more reminiscent of Charlie, but it's expected to be a lot bigger later on as we're looking at things here in the Weather Center. So let me go ahead and do some things here while I'm off camera. And I want to put the wind radii forecast on. You see how it grows. You see that red area with the hurricane gust now, and then gets bigger and bigger, and you see that there toward the Florida coastline. So indicating that, increasing size here with this. Something that, is going to increase storm surge threat. Even if the wind number goes down, it's going to push up a lot of water there and be very problematic. Now, it's not going quite as quick, so that could affect the storm surge a little, but, not really. I mean, Ian wasn't going extremely quick, and it still was catastrophic for areas down in southwest Florida. So, the size of this, the bigger player in this than anything, just a terrible, terrible thing. Another one of these, disasters that's going to cost so much money coming toward the state of Florida and toward the southeast U.S. in terms of, concern. I mean, this is more just about Florida. The other one, of course, North Carolina is where they were really the hardest hit, as I'll get into some numbers here in a few moments. But again, we're watching nationally, we're watching regionally, we're watching for the state, we're watching for our viewing circle. And just to remind you guys here, our viewing circle consists of 62 counties here. We're in Bradford County, and I see you guys the numbers I'm expecting for Bradford County right now. I know we're going to keep an eye on things. I'll be doing more updates on all the different platforms, obviously, and tracking things, even doing some digital streams probably from time to time with satellite and the like. And you can always go to clutter.com/radar for an interactive look at things. I'm not on the air, but I'm not on the air. And then also, you can also look at some of the model guidance here too. Gotta remember that, each rental vary, and that's not the official forecast, but there is some model guidance there within some of the different tools you can maneuver with in the interactive radar source there. But again, watching things always on for the tornado warnings in the 62 counties as well. As I go ahead and, remember and think about, we got all those in Helene, so we were on for so long with those, leading up to that landfall. We hope in an ideal situation, none of this is ideal at all, but, we hope we don't have as many of those so we can, focus more on the storm's impacts. But we're really trying to break away from the tornado stuff, even when the warnings weren't playing, just focus on how bad Helene was going to be. Taylor County taking it on the chin, and we still have folks in areas like Coffee County and Atkinson County there, and that vicinity in the dark here tonight. Those are areas that, they're not quite as close to some areas of more population, so sometimes they kind of maybe aren't thought about as much, to be quite honest. But as we go ahead and, just look there, you also got to think that, the resources are further away too. That's part of it. But as you're kind of looking at things, as you're kind of tracking things. So, okay, so let me go ahead and kind of get back here on camera for you guys as we continue along. I'm going to go ahead and do that as we just, continue to watch everything here in the Weather Center. Again, tracking our Hurricane Milton, a Category 1 storm, max sustained winds at that 2 a.m. update, 90 miles an hour. Higher gust, obviously, but a lot of times, we saw this in Helene and Adele. You don't really see gusts higher in the measurements. Granted, those areas, that were hitting those, a little less populated closer to the coast. We still had high gusts like Alma, Georgia, was the highest I believe we recorded in Helene, 100 miles an hour. So interesting to think about it like that. As we continue along here with the very latest, let me see if I have some questions here. So let me go ahead and look here. So any word on what to expect in the east coast of Florida near West Palm, Jupiter, and Stewart? Well, right now, I mean, we'll watch things. Right now the worst is going to be off to your north, but you're at the coast, so you have to be watching there. But let me go ahead and look at that here right now. Because we want to look at the wind direction for this, because I'm focusing on my area, but I want to just show that since we had that question here. So let me do the model overlay and try to figure this out for everybody. So the storm, this is when it's further away, so I need to back this up. So this is what the way the wind direction could be, and this model's going to go further north, but it's still going to show the wind direction forecast well for like West Palm. So you can kind of see here as we look, so you kind of see the waters going out around Tampa at this point, and with this track, eventually it won't because of where this is taking it. You see here, that's that. Let's see, that's 2 a.m. on Thursday. In this scenario, the water goes right up to Tampa Bay, and that's just catastrophic. And the center goes a little north, which is not good at all for our area. But as you're looking down here now, it could be a little bit stronger wind than what this is showing. But right now, it doesn't have the surge factor coming in. I know we haven't even tested down there that much. I mean, in Southeast Florida, San Andrew, and this is not going to be a test for them, I wouldn't think, at this point. But you see the overall wind direction here not being that big factor, because for the surge you have to have it coming like this. So right now the surge shouldn't be too bad. Could have some rain from this, and I'll see the rainfall forecast here in a moment. Could be a good bit of rain in the overall pattern here this week. Some wind, but the worst will probably, for now, unless things adjust, should stay to your north around West Palm. I remember back in Ian, West Palm, it was not that big of a deal. And, they just across the state, across, the other coast, from the east coast over here to the west coast, it was a whole different scenario. Quite honestly, completely different world, really, but from what they had on the east coast with Ian and what they had on the west coast. So I'm not too concerned right now, West Palm area. Of course, if this adjusts a lot south, then we'll have to watch, and talk a lot more about that area. But I wouldn't be too concerned right now. I know in Wilma, of course, things were further south and problematic down there. So we still got to watch, but right now it's probably going to go off to your north here by a pretty good way. Still could have maybe like a tropical storm watch or something. I wouldn't expect a hurricane watch down there at this point around West Palm, but we'll watch things here. And storm surge shouldn't be the factor, like I said, that, further to the north. And let me run that just a little more because, further to the north, look at what that's doing. And even if this goes further south, this model is already aggressively going further north. But even if it doesn't, look at the direction here. Let's push the storm surge in around St. Augustine, Jacksonville, Fernandina Beach, Palm Coast area, Flagler Beach, and the like, and that causes problems up here. But you see, other areas, like Cedar Key, you're not getting a surge necessarily, but as you get further south, you're getting it bad potentially, depending on if this goes as far north as this goes. Now, it depends on, if it goes further south, then you don't get it this far north up here, but you could still get it really bad down here. So, not maybe as much like Homosassa Springs, but then Tampa gets it real bad. So both could end up getting it bad this scenario in the GFS verified. So trying to answer that question there as we're looking at things on Twitter/X, and then let's see. Okay, so on YouTube, Toby's asking about the wind gust in Tampa. No, I'm actually saying the wind gusts are going to be much higher than that, to be quite honest. I mean, I'll throw up again what the forecast was there. I know some folks will say different things and the like, but, my forecast here for the Tampa area right now saying quite a bit higher than 70 miles an hour. I'm going right now for Tampa just to 130 miles an hour. Now, may not be that, high. It could be, maybe not 70, but it could be, only gusting to 80 or 90. And if you're on the south side of the storm, your surge could just be terrible, wiping everything away. So keep that in mind too. But yeah, I would definitely go higher than 70 with peak gusts around Tampa there from Milton. So just answering that question for you there, Toby, as we continue to just give you guys the very latest information here to protect you, your friends, and your families. So let me go ahead and see what else we might have for you guys here. in this vessel coverage of Hurricane Milton at this late night hour. So, we'll have all that debris around, and some of this has been picked up, I'm sure, as we're looking towards some different communities. But as you see here, after Helene, like where I'm at in Bradford, you have storm debris, you have issues at lines, and I've had, restorations in a lot of areas and the like. This over a week ago, this image. But point being, you still have debris around, and that could be, if the wind really picks up, it could be, flying projectiles, especially if you have the debris further south, closer to where the winds are expected to be the strongest right now, based on the official forecast. But even then, some of this here, this debris could be blocking, storm drains and ditches and the like, and causes, you know, issues there with drainage from all the heavy rain we're expecting from Milton. So you got to keep that in mind too. Now, another thing about Helene here, and this is like very, very sober and graphic. It takes, a while to get all this information put together. It's not, the complete picture yet. But this is information as of Saturday from the Twitter/X account, Weather Fatalities. The information from that I use, to create this. I derived the data from that and then, overlaid that per se with the media market here, that each death here, each fatality corresponded with. At least 241 dead as of this information, with many missing. But then the Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville, Anderson television market, we're talking about, the bulk of the fatalities happening up there. A lot of them, especially in Asheville, there's like, different TV stations. That the reason it's more names than this one is because they're in different places within that market. So that's why it makes it a little tricky, and they're different, identifiers and the like. But a lot of those deaths in North Carolina, there's still a high number really in South Carolina, but nothing like what they had in Western North Carolina. Buncombe County, I believe, is over 70 folks, and in a situation there where they lost their life. But as you see here, 129 folks, lost their life in that TV area from a storm that made landfall in our area in Taylor County. I mean, all that flooding, even the wind now is problematic in like South Carolina too, knocking trees down and the like. And I mean, North Carolina was an issue as well, but there's more about the rain coming in at an astronomical rate, and already having rain beforehand and being in the mountains, and things were just, falling apart, really. You see then going down from that market, which is all one market, a pretty big one. Then you have Augusta there. It's a smaller TV market, media market, but 21, folks lost their life within that area covered by those set of TV stations. That set of TV stations, that's it to say. And then as you look towards Charlotte, North Carolina, that set of TV stations had 18 fatalities in their area. And then where the storm seems to be headed right now, 17 folks lost their life in the Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota area, which, it's just tragic. I mean, this could be a much worse storm surge in Milton than what they had with that. A lot of those fatalities were in Pinellas County in that area, and it's a situation where the surge could be much worse here in Milton than Macon area. We were expecting storm to go a little bit further west, and that number would have been higher, but in the eastern areas especially, we had fatalities. 9 folks lost their life there. Tri-Cities, which is like Johnson City, Tennessee, Bristol, 8 people so far, but that could go up. And I didn't change the order on that. But Columbia, South Carolina, there, 9 folks lost their life. I know, just trying to update all this information, ended up having that number jump ahead of Tri-Cities. But then Savannah, there, 6 folks lost their life in that area. And then going to our TV areas now, and media markets, DMAs, designated market areas. Jacksonville, Brunswick here, 4. I know we don't really use that terminology on TV very much, but it just helps sort out the areas that were impacted the highest here, but that's, Jacksonville market, our counties involved there, and then, Tallahassee, Thomasville, that's where the storm hit. Taylor County, and then you have 3 deaths. Those were in South Georgia, I believe, looking toward Valdosta especially. And then as you look there, Fort Myers and Naples, 3 people lost their life in that market. 3 in Knoxville, 1 in the Albany area, and then 1 in Gainesville. So Albany, Gainesville are our markets as well, as we're looking at the different counties, all Gainesville, a lot of Albany, and then not knowing Atlanta, which, was something that's a pretty big surprise considering the track was kind of aiming right at them for a while there. But it kind of deviated here on that as we were looking at things, we were tracking the situation. They still had flooding concerns, but it could have been a lot worse there. You see 9 others there between different markets, and then just not certain on exactly where they were. But so many people losing their life as it's just a tragic, tragic situation in Milton. As we go ahead, excuse me, in Helene and now Milton, going to be a tragic situation here as well, it would seem, as we go ahead and look now at some preparedness considerations. I know you want to try to clean up Helene debris ahead of Milton. And then you also have that local inland flood risk as well. As we're looking at things here, as we're tracking the situation, I know you just got to secure property and decide whether evacuation is necessary. I know life-threatening storm surge is certain across parts of the zone. I know we've had, houses in some cases that have, it seems, burnt down with electrical vehicles, possibly being the cause there because of that salt water intrusion. So you got to be really careful about that. We don't want to see more house fires in Milton like what we saw in Helene and other storms over the years here. And then a basic disaster supplies kit includes water, non-perishable food, battery-powered hand crank radio, NOAA weather radio, flashlight, and first aid kit. It's also, and I know they learned this sadly, after the storm in areas like Augusta, but it's also important to have cash and gas on hand. They learned this around, areas like Asheville there. Really important to have the cash there. So, in some cases you need that to get gas after the storm because the internet's down, but then just to get food even because you can't use your credit card because the internet's down, and then you need gas to be able to get places. Or for your generator, which you got to be very careful with. It's the full list there's on ready.gov/kit. You want to charge up your devices. And many power outages are certain here across the state, unfortunately. And you got to be ready to move that interior room in a tornado/extreme wind event. And then after a storm moves through, staying away from power lines and also generator safety is very critical. So very important to keep in mind there. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Had that after a storm that powered out a while in Florida. It could be something, where we end up having folks lose their life after the storm. You gotta be careful when you're cleaning up storm debris. You gotta treat intersections without power, or, the traffic lights aren't working. You gotta treat those as 4-way stops. So, but then just the generator to know, you cannot run those in your homes. Those gas-powered generators, because that can lead to a very, very quick situation that becomes life-threatening. So keep that in mind. Power lines can still be electrified after a storm. Of course, tropical climatology here over in October, so chances start to go down a little, but, it's about October 10th. We've seen storms in the past, like, Matthew and Michael, and now another M name, ironically, things correlating in that regard now with Milton coming toward Florida to cause devastation, it would seem, a very sad and tragic way. As we go ahead and look here at the area at greatest risk for widespread power outages from dangerous and impactful Hurricane Milton, look like 75-mile-an-hour plus gusts will be possible in this zone. Granted, we were talking about Tampa earlier in that question. I'm expecting a lot higher around there. It's just, I wanted to show everywhere we're expecting at least 75, meaning that's where we're going to have probably widespread power outages based on the latest information. Now, this could change. If you look real carefully, I tried to include the county areas. You can't see them very good, but, West Palm's not really in that. Stark's not in that. Gainesville's not in that right now. If anything, I would say this gets north a little bit, but this is where I'm expecting widespread power outages. So, got to charge the devices up. It's still subject to change, but, Southern Levy's in here, a little bit of Alachua. But then we're talking about especially Putnam, St. Johns, Flagler, and Marion counties. We're expecting the power outage concern to be the highest within our 62 counties. But then you see Orlando and Tampa, based on the official track. The East Coast, Orlando area. You think of Orlando, you think of Osceola County there. So Disney World, you think of St. Cloud in that county as well. Widespread power outage expected based on the latest information. You have Cape Canaveral, same story. Of course, we're thinking about Lakeland. You have so many areas that are going to lose power, maybe, for some of this, an extended time frame. So, got to be very careful with that as we go ahead and show you there the tornado safety tips now, because you still got to watch for tornadoes, as hurricanes can and do spawn tornadoes. We saw it, I believe, in Wheeler County in Helene there. It was deadly up in central Georgia, a tornado coming through. Now, the ones in our area, not really noteworthy, but we were tracking the warnings. You see a tornado watch that could get issued. Could have multiple issued. That means conditions favorable here for tornadic activity Want to stay tuned for the latest intelligent devices and have multiple ways to receive alerts on a tornado warning. That means the tornado has been detected using radar or spotted. You want to try to avoid taking shelter in a mobile home. You want to get inside a sturdy building and then put as many walls between you and the outside as possible and protect yourself from flying debris. But putting a bicycle helmet, football helmet, or baseball helmet, you want to have your shoes on in the wake of, that, threat, but you want to have them on ahead of time in case that does happen so you don't get your feet up. And then also, these tornado safety tips, like in Helene, you have to use these in Milton potentially, like you did in Adalia. You have to use these tornado safety tips if you're staying, you're not in a mobile home, you're not in one, you're not in the evacuation zone for the surge. You want to use these because, the winds could be so significant here in Milton. So keep that in mind here as we're looking at it. The extreme wind warnings could get issued, and then you got to treat that. If you're still behind, you're not in a mobile home, you're not in a storm surge threat area, you got to treat it like a tornado is headed your way, because in some cases it seems it would be. I know the damage, wind damage wasn't quite as bad in some spots from Helene as it could have been in terms of like just, total buildings wiped away. But, it was still very significant and deadly. But in some of these situations, if the winds were high enough, you could see, even more of an issue with structures, depending on how strong the storm gets before it hits. Now, winds probably, honestly, even though they were higher with the official information, the winds at the surface may end up being about the same as what we had in Helene at landfall toward Perry, as they could be in Milton toward the Tampa Bay or Sarasota area or wherever the core goes. Still problematic as we go ahead and look now at our covered area. Of course, we're always on for any tornado warning storms in the 62 counties, but also one for storm coverage, hurricane coverage, whatever you need here to keep you safe. As you see that rainfall forecast now for the next 5 days. And now when we're not on the air, you can go to cloudweather.com/radar for an interactive look at things. But then, for those evacuating from the storm surge, you really need to get away, just get away from the rising water risk. So you could just evacuate inland. But this forecast here also shows that if you want to be in places with nicer weather for maybe a little vacation, New Orleans, Mobile, Atlanta could be spots to go. If you're going up I-75, you could go off toward I-10, depending on which way you're going there. Atlanta, of course, just take 75. New Orleans, Mobile. If you're coming up from Tampa area, I'm thinking here with this, you go from 75 over to I-10. But you also could go to Tallahassee and Albany. Those are options too. You don't want to go to areas that have been hit by Helene, though. Unless you're helping out with the cleanup, and it's a situation there, where you're not putting yourself in harm's way and the like. But as you're looking at things, Tallahassee and Albany, they didn't get hit too bad by Helene. So those will be areas to be able to maybe go in there. You see the rain numbers are a lot lower there than where you see the delineation right now, and this could shift north or south a little, but right now you really see the rainfall totals picking up from, just maybe not far from Perry, but, especially to get down there like Lake City over, in the far southeast Georgia, at the end of the southeast of that across the whole peninsula, the rain risk up there. But some areas are a lot more than others. This is just a broad brush by the Weather Prediction Center for now. Some areas here that will probably get over 10 inches. Other areas, because of how they set up with some drier, maybe in spots, we'll get a lot less, but some areas could get 10, 15 inches. So very problematic in that regard as we're looking at things as we go ahead and see. The rain chances here. So 40% on that Monday here around Stark, 30% on that Tuesday, and this in North Florida, South Florida in general. West, a little less, a lot less with Milton, but 90% there. Is what I'm going with. I would say 100, but because, we do have our western areas, some areas won't even get rain from this, so you got to bear that in mind too. But 90% chance here of rain, it's going to be pretty rainy in a lot of our spots here. Some areas with significant flooding, 90% chance on Thursday. It seems like the storm system wants to slow down a little more in terms of coming in a little later to begin with, and that could have implications for this where this makes landfall. And in the forecast highs, you see a little bit of cool air smell because of the rain and clouds, but even after, we'll have lows in the 50s here. So if you're without power in like North Florida, that'll be helpful at least. But 83 for the high on Monday, 84 on Tuesday. Of course, we had that cold front coming in, which is a big factor in all of this. And you see the highs forecasted for Wednesday and Thursday, 79 degrees each day. So That's kind of helping to tell that weather story. I know we've been showing you that graphic there, trying to tell the weather story in terms of the wind direction forecast, because that's so vital in determining where the worst of the surge is, because you could have just, a situation where you don't want to have the surge too much if you're to the north of where this makes landfall here, to the south or at it. Of course, very problematic. You see the rain around the state right now. That interferes with storm prep some. Already causes some antecedent rainfall to the south, which has been a concern with some flooding. So got to keep that in mind as we're looking at things. I mean, you look at some stuff here. I mean, last 12 hours, you see some areas picking up an inch or two in our region. We had over an inch in Stark on that Sunday where I'm at, east of town. And then you see here in southwest Florida, 3, 4, 5 inches already. That's not good to see. Adding to those, already wet soils and spots. So already kind of a situation where you have those winds coming from the east, and northeast in some cases here in nor'easter type conditions, and trying to set up in some cases, so already not the greatest weather. And that kind of reminds you, at least right now, not exactly was stronger, but reminds you a little of what happened ahead of Irma back in 2017 around the first coast region. And I'm just looking, the barometric pressure right now, 1,012.5 millibars, and the fall one here east of Stark, 71 degrees here at now this 2 a.m. hour. So we're getting pretty late. We're going to wrap things up soon. I know those hurricane watches, storm surge watches will be coming out here probably, I'll guarantee it'll be later this morning. Very well be 5 a.m. Probably would be, but if not, then about the 11 a.m. update, I'm sure they'll have them out. With this slowing down a little, he might wait to the 11, and I guess it's theoretically possible this really slows down more in the models. They might wait to the 5 o'clock tonight, but I would say for at least by 11 they would issue those. I think they were thinking more to 5 a.m. before, but it's possible it's the 11 because this slowing down some as we say some of the forecast here. You see some of these models want to tell you this making landfall here north of Newport Richie, and that gets it worse for areas further up in our area, but also for Tampa. The surge is a bigger problem even, because if it makes landfall south, they don't have that problem. As we look here at the forecast, at the latest information, I know you have the wind direction here. I mean, if it makes landfall down here, where this TVC and consensus shows things, and you have to search the, areas around Venice and maybe, around Sarasota, but even then, this goes, it depends on where this takes it exactly. I think it has the angle, yeah, it does. So it would take about the worst of the surge right in Sarasota, but then up here they wouldn't have the surge because of the angle here in general. So, but if it goes north, very problematic. If it goes right at Tampa, very problematic. And we're just going to keep on watching our hurricane. Here's a Cat 1 right now. Category 1, but you see that eye, that pinhole eye trying to form. And it's going to be a potentially nightmare situation here. Florida state of Florida as we look ahead here in the timeline. So you got to be prepared here as we look ahead, as we continue to give you guys the very latest to protect you, your friends, and your family. So let's see, we have some more information. Question about Alachua County. Evacuations, I wouldn't think they'd be ordered right now, as we're looking for Alachua in terms of the wind potential. As we're looking, but the flooding threat, could be a different story. Now, if this shifts, then they might have to issue it for like the wind potential for mobile homes, but don't think we have any, evacuations for Alachua County, Gainesville right now. But flooding threat definitely could be a big deal. And if the track were to shift some, then that wind threat would go up there as well. Still got to charge those devices up around Alachua County and Gainesville for sure, because power outages, I'm sure some will occur as we're looking there, but it, could escalate if the track shifts like that DFS model is trying to indicate. As we're looking here, okay, so folks talking about a gust of wind, just a little bit of wind, well, obviously a sustained wind, gust of wind, things kind of vary here some. Sustained is what the Hurricane Center goes off of in terms of their advisories, but a lot of times those, some of the higher, numbers that we see correlating to the gusts. So, if we have a storm that hits at 140 miles an hour or 115, and this is about the number we see in the highest gust, down at the surface, granted there's a chance that some of those, readings aren't being measured. But, you got to take the storm seriously. Gusts to, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, still knock out a lot of power. But once you get higher, then you're really starting to talk about, more damage, more destruction, more devastation. So, got to keep that in mind. That's going to wrap it up for now. Thank you so much for tuning in and trusting me. Hope you have a great night out there, and I'll be back on here, as is needed here in the days to come. I'll probably be on a lot here, obviously, as the situation does develop and as we get more information in. Of course, you can go to Carter.com and look at the latest information from the Hurricane Center and see the new alerts coming out. And I'll be posting stuff here as needed on all the different platforms to keep you guys safe and informed. So very important is to continue to watch everything here in the Weather Center. It's all about protecting you. It's all about protecting your friends, and it's all about protecting your family. And what is going to go down as one of the worst hurricane seasons it seems in the history of the state of Florida. And we're here to get you through it every step of the way. And I just hope you guys are staying safe. You got to run from the water, hide from the wind. Those are some very important things to keep in mind. So those mandatory evacuations, the storm surge threat, you got to take those seriously because, just a little bit of water, just a few feet for sure could result in a drowning for you and your family. I mean, it takes 6 inches of water to knock you down. So very serious situation for the Florida West Coast, but even, First Coast region, we could have some big storm surge issues in terms of damage, and still on a lesser, side of things with lesser numbers, but still it would be considered life-threatening. So we're going to be here for now. Have a great night. Stay safe out there and get some rest as you look ahead to some very, very busy days ahead here as you're tracking things, watching from home, taking acts, and just, very busy days on my end here as well to try to inform you, your friends, and your family.